She escaped her toxic marriage and boarded a plane, unaware the person besides her was Vampire King. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Let's dive into the story. Mia sat quietly in the airport terminal, her heart racing with anticipation and fear. The past few weeks had been a blur, an endless cycle of sleepless nights and tears. But now, as she clutched her one-way ticket to freedom, she couldn't help but feel a strange mix of excitement and guilt. She had finally done it. She had finally escaped the toxic marriage that had consumed her for far too long. She had left behind the man who had controlled every part of her life, the man who made her feel small, insignificant, and terrified. Her ex-husband had never laid a hand on her in violence, but his words and actions were enough to destroy her self-esteem. Now, with nothing but a small bag and the clothes on her back, Mia was ready to start over. She had no idea where this journey would take her, but it had to be better than staying in the hell she had known for so many years. The flight was booked to a city she had always dreamed of living in. It was a fresh start, a place where no one knew her, and she could be free to be herself again. Mia felt her stomach tighten as the boarding announcement came over the loudspeaker. She stood up, took a deep breath, and made her way to the gate. As she boarded the plane, she couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over her. She was finally free. She slid into her seat, glancing around the cabin to see an assortment of passengers settling in. But her attention was drawn to the man seated next to her. He was tall, with sharp features and dark eyes that seemed to pierce right through her. His presence was commanding, even in the cramped space of the airplane. Mia couldn't help but notice how out of place he seemed. He looked like he belonged in a different world, one of power and mystery. His tailored suit, his icy demeanor, and the way he exuded an air of authority made her feel small. For a moment, their eyes met, and she felt an unsettling shiver run down her spine. But she quickly turned away, feeling self-conscious. She had no time to focus on strange men. She was on a mission to find her new life. The flight took off, and Mia tried to relax, focusing on the soft hum of the engines and the comfort of the seat. But the man next to her seemed to be everywhere. Every time she glanced at him, he was watching her, his intense gaze never faltering. Mia felt a knot form in her stomach. What was it about him that felt so dangerous? She tried to shake off the feeling, reminding herself that she was safe. She was free. She was on her way to a new life, and she couldn't let anyone or anything get in her way. As the plane continued its journey, Mia found herself oddly drawn to the mysterious man. He was quiet, composed, and seemed entirely out of place among the ordinary passengers. She couldn't help but wonder who he was. What brought him on this flight, sitting next to a woman like her, someone with no future, no plan, and no direction? As the hours passed, Mia dozed off, her head resting against the seat. She tried to push aside the worries and fears that had plagued her for so long, focusing only on the future. But when she awoke, she found herself face to face with the man beside her. He had leaned closer while she slept, and now his cold eyes were fixed on her with an intensity that made her heart race. "Are you all right?" His voice was low, but there was something unnerving about the way he spoke. Mia froze. Something in his gaze made her nervous, but she couldn't place why. She simply nodded, her throat dry. "Just tired," she replied softly, looking down at her hands in her lap. She tried to ignore the strange feeling crawling up her spine, but it was impossible to shake. The man didn't speak again, but his presence was all-encompassing. As the flight continued, Mia couldn't stop thinking about him. Who was he? Why was he sitting next to her? And most importantly, why did she feel so unsettled? Little did she know, the man beside her wasn't just a businessman or a random stranger. He was the Vampire King, a being of immense power and danger. And their encounter was no accident. As the hours passed, Mia tried to settle into her seat, feeling a strange unease that she couldn't shake. The man sitting next to her remained eerily silent, but his presence felt like a heavy weight pressing down on her chest. She attempted to distract herself by looking out the window, watching as the clouds passed beneath them, but her thoughts kept drifting back to him. His piercing gaze lingered in her mind, and despite her best efforts, she couldn't push the unsettling feeling away. She had never been one to jump to conclusions or make assumptions about people, but there was something about him that felt different. The way he carried himself, the way he seemed to exude an air of power and mystery, was unlike anyone she had ever met. His dark eyes, almost unnaturally intense, seemed to pierce through her as if he could read her thoughts. Mia shifted uncomfortably in her seat, trying to focus on the other passengers around her. The plane was relatively quiet, with most people lost in their own worlds, either reading, sleeping, or staring out the windows. But the man beside her was different. He wasn't looking at anything in particular. He just sat there, his eyes fixed forward, his expression unreadable. It was as though he was waiting for something, or someone. Mia felt a sharp pang of anxiety twist in her stomach. She had no reason to feel this way. He had done nothing to make her feel unsafe. But something deep inside her told her that he was more than just an ordinary person. And the more she tried to ignore him, the more that feeling grew stronger. She couldn't help herself. She had to know more about him. "Excuse me," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. He turned to look at her, and for a moment, their eyes locked. His gaze was even more intense up close, like a storm brewing just beneath the surface. "Yes." His voice was calm, almost too calm, and it sent a shiver down her spine. "I was just wondering." "Where are you headed?" she asked, her curiosity finally overcoming her hesitation. He smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was almost too perfect, like it had been carefully crafted for a specific purpose. "I'm heading to New York," he said, his voice smooth and measured. "For business." Mia nodded, unsure of what else to say. She couldn't exactly tell him she was running away from her broken life, from a toxic marriage she had barely escaped. But the way he spoke, with such confidence, made her feel like a small, insignificant speck in the world. She felt suddenly self-conscious, as though she didn't belong in the same space as him. As the flight continued, Mia couldn't help but notice that every time she glanced at him, he was watching her. It wasn't overt, but his gaze never wavered. She tried to focus on her book, but her mind kept wandering back to him. She couldn't escape the nagging feeling that there was something she wasn't seeing, something she couldn't quite grasp. Her heart raced every time their eyes met, and she found herself holding her breath as he spoke in his low, hypnotic voice. "Tell me," he said, breaking the silence between them. "What's your story?" Mia blinked, surprised by the question. She had been so focused on her own unease that she hadn't expected him to speak again. "My story," she echoed, her voice faltering. She stopped herself, unsure of how much to share. "I'm just on my way to start over," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He raised an eyebrow, his lips curling into a faint smirk. "Start over," he repeated, as though the phrase intrigued him. "How interesting." Mia shifted in her seat, suddenly feeling vulnerable under his gaze. She didn't want to share the details of her life with a stranger, especially not someone like him. There was something about him that made her feel like she was being judged, like every word she spoke was being weighed and measured. "What about you?" she asked, her voice a little steadier now. "What's your story?" He smiled again, but this time it was different. It was not just a smile. It was a knowing smile, one that seemed to suggest that he was holding some secret. "My story," he said softly, his eyes darkening as he leaned closer. "I'm not sure it's a story you're ready to hear." Mia felt a chill run through her as his words settled in the air between them. She didn't know why, but something about his tone, his words, sent a ripple of unease through her. She leaned back in her seat, suddenly feeling very small. She wasn't sure what she had expected from the conversation, but it certainly wasn't this. She looked away, trying to shake the feeling that something was about to happen, something she wasn't prepared for. As the plane began its descent, the man beside her remained silent, his gaze fixed out the window. Mia felt a sudden pang of disappointment. She had wanted to know more, to understand what was going on in his mind. But now, as the plane neared its destination, she realized she may never know the truth. Her heart was still racing, her mind still buzzing with questions. Who was he really? And why had they crossed paths on this flight? She had no answers, but as the plane touched down on the runway, Mia knew one thing for certain. Her life would never be the same again. As the plane finally landed on the tarmac, Mia couldn't shake the feeling that her life had already changed in ways she couldn't fully understand. She stepped off the plane into the airport, her heart pounding as she tried to keep her composure. She had been running for so long, and now, finally, she was in a new city, a place where she could reinvent herself. It was supposed to be a fresh start, but something about her encounter with the mysterious man lingered in her mind, like a shadow that wouldn't leave. She walked through the terminal, taking in the bustling atmosphere of the airport. People rushed past her, absorbed in their own lives, and for a brief moment, she felt like just another face in the crowd. But then, she saw him again. The man who had been sitting next to her on the plane. He was standing by the baggage claim, his tall frame hard to miss among the other travelers. His dark eyes locked onto hers across the crowded terminal, and Mia's heart skipped a beat. He was no longer the distant, enigmatic figure from the flight. Now, he was closer, too close. He gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod, as though acknowledging her presence. She quickly turned away, feeling her face flush with embarrassment. What was wrong with her? Why couldn't she just forget about him? But there was no denying the connection she felt. There was something about him, something that both intrigued and terrified her. Mia grabbed her bag from the carousel and made her way toward the exit, trying to ignore the nagging feeling that the man was still watching her. As she stepped outside into the cool evening air, she paused for a moment to gather her bearings. The city stretched out before her, a maze of streets and lights. She was free, or at least, she thought she was. But the feeling that something was off wouldn't leave. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, breaking her thoughts. She pulled it out to see a message from her mother. "Are you okay? Please call me when you can. Love you." Mia smiled faintly, her heart aching at the thought of her mother. She had always been the one to support her, even when Mia had been too afraid to leave her abusive marriage. But now, as Mia stood on the edge of this new life, she realized that she was truly alone for the first time in years. She hadn't even thought about her ex-husband since boarding the plane. It was like he didn't even exist anymore. Mia took a deep breath and walked toward the taxi stand. She had no destination in mind, but that didn't matter. All she wanted was to leave everything behind. As she climbed into the back of a cab, she noticed a black car parked across the street. It was sleek and expensive-looking, the kind of car that screamed power and authority. The windows were tinted, but as she glanced at it, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone inside was watching her. She quickly looked away, her pulse quickening. Her mind was playing tricks on her, or so she thought. The driver's voice broke through her thoughts. "Where to, miss?" Mia gave him the name of a small hotel she had researched earlier, a quiet place away from the crowds. As the cab drove through the city, Mia tried to focus on the passing buildings, the neon signs lighting up the night. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't stop thinking about the man from the plane. What was his deal? Why had he been so interested in her? And why did she feel this strange, unshakable pull toward him? The cab came to a stop in front of the hotel, and Mia stepped out, her legs feeling a little unsteady. She paid the driver and made her way inside. The hotel lobby was quiet, the kind of place that seemed to exist outside of time. The front desk clerk was polite but distant, handing her the key to a room on the third floor. Mia walked up the stairs, her footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. When she reached her room, she opened the door and stepped inside. It was small, but clean and comfortable, a perfect place for someone who just needed a break from everything. She set her bag down on the bed and sat for a moment, letting the silence wash over her. She thought she would be relieved, but instead, she felt uneasy, like something was missing. Her phone buzzed again, and she glanced at the screen. Another message from her mother. "I'm really worried, Mia. Please call." Mia sighed and typed a quick reply, assuring her that she was okay. But the truth was, she didn't feel okay. She didn't feel anything, really. She was just numb, floating through this new life without a clear sense of purpose. Then, there was a knock at the door. Mia's heart jumped in her chest, and she froze for a moment. Who could it be at this hour? She walked cautiously to the door and peeked through the peephole. It was him, the man from the plane. Her breath caught in her throat as she stared at his tall, imposing figure. How had he found her? What did he want? She hesitated for a moment, but then she opened the door. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. He gave her a small, almost amused smile. "I think we need to talk." The door swung open, and Mia stood frozen, staring at the man who had appeared in front of her. His presence was overwhelming, like an electric charge filling the room. He was taller than she remembered, his sharp features more striking up close. His eyes, dark and intense, locked onto hers with an unwavering focus that made her heart race. "What are you doing here?" Mia asked, her voice shaking slightly despite her best effort to stay composed. The man smiled, but it was not a warm smile. It was cold, calculating, and something about it made her stomach tighten. "I think we need to talk," he said, his voice low and smooth, like the calm before a storm. Mia swallowed hard, her mind racing. How did he find her? Why was he here? And what did he want with her? She stepped back from the door, letting him enter, though every instinct in her screamed to turn him away. The room suddenly felt smaller, the air heavier. She closed the door behind him, but didn't dare to turn her back on him. He walked into the room with a sense of purpose, his every movement deliberate, as if he owned the space. He took a moment to look around, his gaze lingering on the simple, yet clean room. "Not exactly what I expected," he muttered, almost to himself. Mia didn't know what to say. She had so many questions, so many fears, but she couldn't find the words to ask them. "Why are you following me?" she finally managed to ask, her voice barely above a whisper. The man turned to face her, his eyes narrowing slightly, but there was a hint of amusement in them, as if her question was a game to him. "Following you," he repeated. "I'm not following you, Mia. I'm here because I need to talk to you." His voice was calm, too calm, and it made Mia's nerves flare. She felt a strange mix of fear and curiosity. Why did he know her name? Why did he seem to know so much about her already? "What do you want from me?" she demanded, finding her voice a little stronger this time. He stepped closer, and the air between them seemed to grow colder. "I want to understand you, Mia," he said softly, his voice barely more than a whisper. "I want to understand why someone like you is in a place like this, running away, hiding from your past." Mia took a step back, the words stinging like a slap. "You don't know anything about me," she snapped, feeling the need to protect herself. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he just stood there, watching her with those dark, knowing eyes. "I know more than you think," he said finally, his tone almost casual. "I know you're not just running from your husband. I know you're running from yourself, from everything that's kept you chained to a life you didn't choose." Mia felt a wave of heat rise to her face. How dare he assume he knew anything about her? She opened her mouth to argue, but the words caught in her throat. The truth was, he was right. She had been running from herself, from the fear that had gripped her for so long, from the guilt that weighed heavily on her shoulders. She had left everything behind, but the past still haunted her. "Why do you care?" Mia asked, her voice quieter now, a little less defensive. The man's expression softened, just for a moment. "Because I can help you, Mia," he said, his voice almost kind. "I can offer you a chance at something different, something more. But first, you have to trust me." Mia shook her head, trying to shake off the strange pull he seemed to have over her. "I don't even know who you are," she said, her heart racing in her chest. "You're just some stranger I met on a plane. Why should I trust you?" He smiled again, but this time, it was almost genuine. "Because I'm not just any stranger," he said. "I'm someone who can change your life, Mia. I'm someone who can make everything you've been running from disappear." Mia stared at him, her mind racing. She wanted to say no, to push him away, but something in his eyes told her that she wasn't going to be able to walk away from this. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. "I want you to stop running," he replied. "I want you to stop hiding from what you really are, from the life you could have. I want you to embrace the power you've been afraid of." Mia's heart skipped a beat. Power? What was he talking about? She had no power. She was just a woman who had been beaten down by life, by her past, by her own choices. "I don't have any power," she said, almost bitterly. "I'm just a waitress. A woman with no future." The man stepped closer, his eyes locked on hers. "You're wrong," he said softly. "You have power, Mia. You just haven't discovered it yet." Mia's mind spun. What was he talking about? Power? What kind of power could a woman like her possibly have? "I don't understand," she whispered, her voice shaking. The man reached out, his hand brushing hers lightly, sending a jolt of electricity through her body. "I can show you," he said quietly. "But only if you trust me. Only if you stop running from who you really are." Mia felt a chill run through her as his words settled in the air between them. Something about this man, about what he was offering, felt both terrifying and irresistible. For the first time in a long time, Mia felt as though she had a choice, an actual choice in her life. She didn't know what that choice would be, but she knew one thing for sure. Her life would never be the same again. As Mia stood there, her pulse racing, she couldn't help but feel the weight of the man's words pressing down on her. The room felt smaller, the air heavier, as his gaze never wavered. "You have power, Mia," he had said, and somehow, despite everything, a part of her believed him. "I don't understand," she whispered, her voice shaking. "What do you mean by that?" The man took a step closer, his presence overwhelming, but his expression remained calm. He reached out and gently took her hand, his touch sending an unexpected warmth through her. "You've been running from yourself for too long," he said softly. "You've been hiding from the truth. But the truth is, you're more than you think you are. You have power inside you that you've never even begun to tap into." Mia's heart thudded in her chest as she pulled her hand back, staring at him in disbelief. "What are you talking about? I'm just a woman. I'm nobody special." The man smiled, but it wasn't a comforting smile. It was knowing, as if he had seen something in her that she couldn't see in herself. "That's where you're wrong, Mia," he said, his voice steady, almost hypnotic. "You've been given a gift, whether you realize it or not. You have the ability to change your life, to control your future. You just have to embrace it." Mia felt a chill run down her spine, but she couldn't deny the pull of his words. She had always felt like there was something more for her out there, something beyond the life she had been living. She had always known that she was capable of more, but she had never had the courage to pursue it. And now, standing in front of this man, this stranger, who claimed to know things about her she couldn't understand, it felt as if everything she had ever wanted was suddenly within reach. "How do you know all this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What is it that I have?" The man's smile deepened, though it was tinged with something darker, something more dangerous. "I'm not just anyone, Mia," he said, his voice low. "I'm a vampire king, and I've been alive for centuries. I've seen people like you before, people who don't even realize their own potential, their own power. You're no different, but I can show you the way." Mia's breath caught in her throat as she took a step back, her heart pounding. Vampire king? What did that even mean? Was this some kind of joke? She had escaped from one nightmare only to walk into another. I don't believe you," she stammered, shaking her head. But the man didn't seem bothered by her disbelief. In fact, he looked almost amused. "It doesn't matter if you believe me or not," he said, his voice calm and certain. "The truth is, you're here for a reason. You're not just running from your past. You're running toward something, toward your future, and I can help you get there." Mia felt her knees weaken as the weight of his words settled in her chest. She wanted to argue, to push him away, but deep down, she knew that what he was saying was true. She had been running from her past for so long, from the pain, the fear, the guilt. But now, in this strange new world, she could feel the promise of something better, something more. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted quietly, her voice shaking with uncertainty. "I don't know how to let go of everything that's holding me back." The man stepped closer again, his gaze never leaving hers. "You don't have to know everything, Mia," he said softly. "You just have to trust me. Trust that I can help you find your way. Trust that I can show you the power inside you that's been waiting to be unleashed." Mia looked up at him, her heart still pounding in her chest. She didn't know what to think, what to feel. She had spent so many years trying to survive, just trying to make it through each day. And now, this man, this vampire king, was telling her that she had the power to change everything. The future seemed like a distant dream, but now, it felt closer. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. The man's eyes darkened, and for the first time, Mia saw a flicker of something dangerous in his gaze. "I don't want anything from you, Mia," he said, his voice soft but firm. "I want to help you. I want to show you the path to something greater. But you have to make the choice. You have to decide if you're ready to step into that power. If you're ready to stop hiding and start living." Mia's breath caught in her throat as she looked at him, the weight of his words pressing down on her. This was it, the choice she had been waiting for. She could keep running, keep hiding, or she could step forward into the unknown, embrace the power he claimed she had, and change everything. For the first time in years, she felt a spark of hope. I don't know if I can, she said quietly, her voice wavering. I don't know if I'm strong enough. The man's gaze softened, and he reached out, his hand brushing hers gently. You don't have to do it alone, Mia, he said softly. I'm here. I will help you. But the first step is yours to take. Mia closed her eyes for a moment, the weight of everything she had been running from finally settling in. She had spent so long being afraid, so long living in fear of what she couldn't control. But now, standing in front of this man, this vampire king, she felt a surge of something deep inside her. It was time to stop running. It was time to step into the unknown and embrace the power that she had been hiding from for so long. The next few days passed in a haze of uncertainty. Mia had made the decision, however tentative, to follow the man's advice, to embrace the possibility of the power he had spoken of. She had spent most of her time in her small hotel room, contemplating what was happening, trying to make sense of it all. She had walked away from her past, from the life that had been suffocating her, but now, she was faced with a choice that was far greater. She could not keep running, not anymore. The Vampire King's words echoed in her mind, urging her to step into the unknown and trust in the strength she had yet to discover. Mia hadn't been sure of much in her life, but there was something about his presence, something undeniable, that made her believe she could become someone else, someone stronger. She hadn't realized how deeply she had internalized the fear, the self-doubt that had held her captive for so long. Now, she felt the stirrings of something different. She had started to feel a small flicker of something inside her, something that had been buried beneath the years of pain and loss. It was terrifying, but it was also exhilarating. Mia didn't know what would come of it, but for the first time in a long while, she felt like she had a choice. Her future wasn't set in stone, and it wasn't just the man's words that had given her this courage. It was the quiet, hidden strength she had kept locked away for so long. That night, she decided to take the next step. The man, whose name she still hadn't learned, had told her to meet him at an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. He had said it was time for her to see what she was truly capable of. He would show her how to unlock her potential, how to tap into the power that was just waiting to be unleashed. Mia's heart beat faster as she stood in front of the warehouse. The building loomed before her, dark and imposing. The air was thick with the scent of rain, and the streetlights cast long shadows across the cracked pavement. For a moment, Mia hesitated. She wasn't sure what she was about to walk into, but she had come this far. There was no turning back now. As she pushed open the creaky door and stepped inside, her senses were assaulted by the darkness. The warehouse was silent, save for the sound of her footsteps echoing through the empty space. The only light came from a few flickering bulbs overhead, casting eerie shadows on the cold concrete floor. She didn't have to wait long. From the shadows emerged the man, his tall figure cutting through the darkness like a predator. His eyes glowed faintly in the low light, and Mia could feel the air around her crackle with energy. You came, he said, his voice smooth but laced with something darker. Mia nodded, her breath catching in her throat. I'm here, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. What do I need to do? He smiled, but it was not the comforting smile from before. It was a smile of anticipation, of someone who knew exactly what was going to happen next. You need to trust me, he said simply. And you need to trust yourself. He raised his hand, and Mia instinctively took a step back, unsure of what was about to happen. But instead of moving toward her, he gestured toward the center of the room. Stand there, he instructed. Close your eyes and focus. Mia did as he asked, though her heart was pounding in her chest. She didn't know what kind of power he was talking about, but she was willing to try. She had nothing left to lose. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, trying to clear her mind. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, slowly, she began to feel it. A warmth, deep within her chest, spreading outward. It was faint at first, barely noticeable, but it grew stronger with every breath she took. She felt the energy inside her, pulsing and expanding, like a force she had never known existed. She gasped, her eyes flying open as the sensation intensified. The room around her seemed to shift, the air thick with power. What is this? She whispered, her voice shaky. The man stepped closer, his expression intense. This is the power within you, Mia, he said softly. This is what you've been hiding from, what you've been too afraid to accept. Mia's hands trembled as she reached out, feeling the energy swirling around her like a tangible thing. She could sense it now, in her bones. It was her. It was all her, waiting to be harnessed. The realization hit her like a tidal wave. She wasn't just running from her past. She had been running from herself, from the potential that had always been inside her. The Vampire King watched her closely, his gaze unwavering as she processed the rush of energy. "Do you feel it?" he asked, his voice low and calm. "Do you feel the strength, the power? It's yours, Mia. All you have to do is claim it." Mia stood still for a moment, her mind racing. It felt impossible, but the power was undeniable. She could feel it coursing through her veins, connecting her to everything around her. For the first time, she felt alive. She felt unstoppable. With a deep breath, she closed her eyes again, focusing on the energy within her. She knew she was ready. She had to be. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady. The man nodded, a small smile playing at the corner of his lips. "Good. Now, let's see what you can really do." Mia opened her eyes, and with a surge of confidence, she extended her hand. She had no idea what would happen next, but she was no longer afraid. The power that had been hidden inside her for so long was finally hers to command. As Mia stood there, the power inside her began to surge, filling every fiber of her being. She could feel it, like a spark that had been ignited deep within her soul, a force she had never known was possible. Her heart raced as the energy seemed to pulse through her, making the room around her shimmer with an unexplainable intensity. She raised her hand, and for a moment, she could see the faintest glow emanating from her fingertips. The Vampire King, standing just a few feet away, watched her closely, his eyes never leaving her as if he was waiting for something. Mia took a deep breath, focusing on the energy inside her. It was like nothing she had ever experienced, powerful, yet frightening, as if it could consume her if she didn't control it. She had to trust herself. She had to trust him. "Focus, Mia." The Vampire King's voice broke through her concentration, steady and commanding. "Let it flow through you, but do not let it control you. You are the one who controls it now." Mia nodded, though she wasn't sure if she believed it completely. Could she really control something so immense, so foreign to her? She tried to concentrate, letting the power pulse through her body, feeling it expand with each breath. The energy around her began to vibrate, like the hum of 1,000 whispers. She closed her eyes and let it grow, feeling it gather in her chest, ready to be released. But just as she was about to push it outward, a sudden thought hit her. What if she couldn't control it? What if she lost herself in it? Her breath caught in her throat, and for a split second, the room felt like it was closing in on her. The Vampire King's eyes flickered with a knowing look, and he stepped forward, his presence immediately calming. "Don't be afraid," he said softly, his voice a soothing balm against her rising panic. "You have nothing to fear. This power is yours, but you must first learn to trust yourself." Mia's heart was pounding, but his words had an odd effect. She took another deep breath, grounding herself in the moment. Slowly, she let the power flow again, but this time, with purpose. It was like trying to harness a wild storm, but with each passing second, she felt the energy bending to her will. The air in the room grew heavier, the walls almost vibrating with the strength she was beginning to command. Mia's hand trembled as the power focused in her palm, growing brighter, more intense. The Vampire King smiled, his eyes glimmering with something almost like pride. "You are beginning to understand," he said, his voice filled with quiet approval. Mia opened her eyes, her pulse racing with excitement and fear in equal measure. The power was still there, pulsing inside her, but now it was no longer overwhelming. It was hers to command. And in that moment, something inside her shifted. She wasn't just running anymore. She wasn't afraid of what she could become. She was ready. But the feeling of exhilaration was short-lived. The air around her shifted, and suddenly, the room grew darker, colder. The energy in the space changed, becoming charged with an undeniable tension. The Vampire King's expression darkened as he stepped closer, his eyes scanning the room. Mia felt a chill crawl up her spine. "What's happening?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The Vampire King's gaze never left the shadows that seemed to move just beyond their reach. "There is someone here," he said quietly, his voice low and dangerous. "Someone who knows you're here." Mia's stomach dropped. "Who's she?" whispered, her voice trembling. The vampire king turned his gaze back to her, his expression unreadable. Not someone you know, he said, his voice laced with warning, but someone who is very much aware of your presence. Before Mia could respond, the door to the warehouse slammed open, sending a gust of cold air rushing in. Mia's heart skipped a beat as she turned to see a figure standing in the doorway, cloaked in shadows. The figure stepped forward, and Mia's breath caught in her throat as they emerged into the dim light. The figure was tall, their features obscured by a hood, but their eyes, those glowing amber eyes, were unmistakable. The vampire king's eyes narrowed, and Mia could feel the shift in his posture. The air around them seemed to crackle with tension. The figure said nothing, but there was an undeniable presence about them, an energy that made Mia feel like she was standing in the middle of a storm. "Who are you?" the vampire king finally demanded, his voice cold and commanding. The figure didn't answer right away. Instead, they reached up, pulling back their hood to reveal a face that was eerily familiar. Mia's heart stopped. The figure's face was impossibly beautiful, but there was something about it that made her stomach churn. It was a face she knew, or at least, thought she knew. The man's eyes were the same glowing amber as the vampire king's, and his expression was filled with contempt as he stepped closer. "I'm here for her," the stranger said, his voice deep and full of malice. "And I will take her." The vampire king's jaw clenched, his entire body stiffening with barely contained rage. "You will do no such thing," he growled, stepping between Mia and the stranger. The man smirked, unfazed by the vampire king's warning. "We'll see about that," he said, his voice dripping with venom. Mia felt a cold shiver run down her spine as she realized the situation had just escalated far beyond what she was prepared for. She had been running from her past, from the life that had trapped her, but now, she was faced with something far more dangerous than anything she could have imagined. Her power, the one she had just begun to understand, was no longer just a tool for freedom. It was now the center of a deadly battle between forces. She didn't fully comprehend. The tension in the room was palpable as the stranger stepped forward, his gaze locked on Mia with a look that sent a chill down her spine. The vampire king moved to block her, his presence exuding a dangerous calm. Mia could feel the energy in the room shift as the two men squared off, the air thick with an unspoken challenge. The stranger, with his glowing amber eyes and an arrogant smile that never quite reached his eyes, seemed unfazed by the vampire king's protective stance. "You think you can stop me?" he sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. "You're just a relic, an old king, clinging to a past that doesn't exist anymore." The vampire king's eyes narrowed, his posture rigid with restraint. "You're making a mistake," he said, his voice cold, but there was a fire beneath it that Mia could feel. "I don't care who you are. You're not taking her." The stranger's laugh echoed through the room, hollow and mocking. "You think she'll listen to you?" he said, his eyes flicking to Mia with a knowing look. "You're not the only one who can offer her power. She's been running from her past, running from the truth. But you can't save her from herself." The vampire king's expression tightened, but he didn't move, keeping himself between Mia and the stranger. Mia felt the weight of the situation press down on her, her heart racing as her mind spun with questions. Who was this man? What did he want with her? Why was he so confident? The air between them crackled with tension, and Mia could feel it, the dangerous energy that seemed to hum through the very walls of the warehouse. She felt it inside her too, this power that had only just begun to awaken. The man's words were starting to seep into her thoughts, and doubt gnawed at her. Could she really trust the vampire king? Could she trust herself? The stranger took another step forward, his eyes still locked on hers. "I can give you everything he can't," he said, his voice silky and persuasive. "I can show you a world where you have control, a world where you don't have to run. I can make you stronger than you've ever dreamed of." Mia's breath caught in her throat as the words hit her. She had been running for so long, hiding from the painful memories of her past, from the man who had tried to break her. The promise of power, of control, was tempting, but deep down, she knew something was wrong. She had felt the power stirring inside her, but it wasn't about control. It was about something deeper. She turned to the vampire king, who was still watching her, his eyes steady and unwavering. There was something in his gaze, something protective, something she hadn't realized she needed until now. "I don't want what you're offering," Mia said, her voice stronger than she had expected. The stranger's expression faltered for just a moment, his arrogance slipping. "You don't know what you're turning down," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You don't know what you're truly capable of." Mia shook her head, stepping away from him, closer to the Vampire King. The power inside her surged again, a reminder that she had the strength to make her own decisions. She wasn't the same person she had been when she first ran away. She had learned to stand on her own. "I know exactly what I'm capable of," Mia said, her voice steady. "And I know that I don't need you to tell me what to do." The stranger's face twisted with fury, but before he could react, the Vampire King spoke again, his voice a quiet command. "Leave. Now." The stranger's eyes burned with fury, but he didn't move for a moment. He seemed to weigh his options, his gaze flicking between Mia and the Vampire King. "This isn't over," he spat, his voice full of venom. "You'll regret this." And then, with a final, lingering glance at Mia, he turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving the room eerily silent. Mia stood there, her heart still racing, her mind buzzing with adrenaline. She didn't know what had just happened, but she knew one thing. She had made the right choice. The power inside her still thrummed, alive and waiting, but now she felt a strange sense of peace. The Vampire King turned to her, his eyes softening just a fraction. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice gentle, but with an undercurrent of concern. Mia nodded slowly, though her hands still shook. "I think so," she said quietly. The Vampire King studied her for a moment, as if reading her thoughts, before he stepped closer. "You've done well," he said, his tone warm but still carrying that authority she had come to recognize. "You've taken the first step, Mia, but there is more to learn. The path ahead won't be easy, but I'll be here to guide you." Mia felt a swell of something inside her, something hopeful. She wasn't alone in this anymore. "Thank you," she whispered, though she didn't know if she meant it just for him or for herself. The Vampire King nodded, his eyes gleaming with something that resembled pride. "You've just begun to understand what you're capable of," he said softly, "and I'll help you unlock it all. But you have to remember, this is your journey. You must walk it with your eyes open." As he spoke, Mia felt a surge of gratitude. She had never expected to find herself here, standing with a man who claimed to have the answers she sought. But now, with the power inside her awakening, she could feel that her life was finally in her own hands. The future was hers to shape, and this time, she wouldn't run from it. The days that followed were unlike anything Mia had ever experienced. The power inside her, the same power she had once feared, was now something she was beginning to understand. The Vampire King, whose presence was both comforting and intimidating, spent every moment guiding her, teaching her how to control the force that surged through her. It was not a simple task. It was exhausting and draining, but every time she succeeded in bending the power to her will, she felt a sense of achievement, like a light breaking through the darkness. But even as she trained and grew stronger, doubts continued to linger in her mind. She had made her choice, but she had yet to fully embrace the consequences of that decision. What did it mean to truly accept this power? Was she becoming someone she would no longer recognize? One evening, after a particularly intense training session, Mia found herself alone in the quiet of her room. The Vampire King had stepped out to attend to other matters, and she had been left with her thoughts. The weight of everything that had happened in the past week settled over her like a blanket. She had walked away from a life that had trapped her, but now, she was stepping into something far more dangerous. The power she wielded was unlike anything she had ever imagined. She had barely begun to scratch the surface of what she could do. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. A knock on the door broke her thoughts, and she turned quickly, startled. She opened it to find the Vampire King standing there, his expression unreadable. "Mia," he said, his voice calm but carrying an unmistakable weight. "We need to talk." Mia's heart skipped a beat, and she stepped aside to let him in. As he entered the room, the temperature seemed to drop slightly, his presence filling the space with an undeniable intensity. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The Vampire King looked at her for a long moment before speaking. "There are things you still don't know. Things I haven't told you. Things that could change everything." Mia's pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, his gaze shifting to the floor for a brief moment before meeting her eyes once more. "There are forces at play here, Mia," he said, his voice low. "Forces that have been watching you, waiting for the right moment to strike." The words hit her like a slap. She had known this wasn't going to be easy, but hearing it from him made the reality of the situation all the more real. "What kind of forces?" she asked, her voice shaking. The Vampire King stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "I don't know exactly," he said, his voice filled with a rare vulnerability. "But I've been around long enough to recognize when something isn't right. There are those who want to use your power for their own gain. They've been tracking you, watching you from the moment you stepped into this world." Mia's mind raced as the implications of his words settled in. She had thought that by accepting the power, she had taken control of her life. But now, she realized that she was just another player in a much larger game, one that she didn't fully understand. "What do I do?" she asked, her voice small. The Vampire King's expression softened slightly. "You're not alone in this, Mia," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "I'll protect you, but you have to be ready. Ready to face the truth. Ready to fight for what's yours." Mia nodded, though doubt still lingered. In her mind, "I don't know if I'm ready for this," she whispered. The Vampire King placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch reassuring but strong. "None of us are ever truly ready. But that doesn't stop us from doing what's necessary." For a moment, the room was silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Mia could feel the weight of the responsibility settle over her. She had chosen this path, and now there was no turning back. The future was uncertain, but she knew that she had to face it head-on. "I will be ready," she said, her voice steadying. The Vampire King smiled, a rare expression that softened his usually intense demeanor. "Good," he said. "Then let's prepare for what's coming." As he turned to leave, Mia felt a surge of determination rise within her. The power inside her was growing, and with it, she knew that her journey was far from over. Whatever lay ahead, she would face it with the strength she had found within herself. She wasn't running anymore. She was ready to fight for her future. For the first time in a long time, Mia felt like she was in control of her own destiny. And with that, the Vampire King's warning echoed in her mind. The forces that had been watching her were not going to wait forever. The battle for her power, for her future, was just beginning. The following days were filled with a sense of growing tension. Mia could feel it in the air, in the way the Vampire King watched her with a quiet intensity. They had barely spoken since their conversation in the warehouse, but the unspoken understanding between them was clear. Something was coming. Something big. Mia's training continued, though it felt different now. There was no longer a sense of curiosity or discovery. Now, every lesson felt like preparation for something inevitable. The power inside her had become more than just an energy she could control. It had become a part of who she was, an extension of herself. And with that power came the weight of responsibility. She could no longer deny the truth of the Vampire King's words. She was being watched. She was part of a much bigger game, and there was no escape. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a dim golden light through the windows of her temporary refuge, the Vampire King entered her room without warning. His presence filled the space, and for a moment, Mia felt the familiar rush of anxiety that always seemed to accompany him. But this time, something was different. His expression was serious, his jaw tense. "Mia," he said, his voice low, "we need to move. Now." Mia's heart skipped a beat. "What's happening?" she asked, her voice shaky. "They've found us," he replied, his eyes narrowing. "The forces I warned you about. They're coming." The words hit her like a blow to the chest. She had known this was coming, but hearing it out loud made the reality of it settle heavily in her stomach. "Who are they?" she asked, fear creeping into her voice. "They're a faction of vampires, ancient and powerful," the Vampire King said, his gaze unwavering. "They've been watching you, tracking you ever since you arrived here. They want what you have, Mia. They want the power inside you." Mia's breath caught in her throat. "But I don't even know how to control it all. I barely understand it. That's why they want you," the Vampire King said, his tone sharp. "You're the key to something much larger than you realize. And if they get their hands on you, they'll use that power to destroy everything." Mia's mind raced, the weight of his words sinking in. She had always known that her newfound power came with a price. But now it was clear that the cost was more than she had ever imagined. She wasn't just running from her past anymore. She was running from something far more dangerous. The Vampire King moved to the window, his gaze scanning the horizon as if he could already feel the approaching danger. "We don't have much time," he said, his voice taut with urgency. "We need to leave before they get here. And you need to be ready to fight." "Fight," Mia echoed, her voice trembling. She had barely learned to control the power inside her, and now she was supposed to fight? How could she face something this dangerous, something that seemed so far beyond her reach? The Vampire King turned to face her, his eyes intense. "You've trained for this, Mia. You've learned how to control the power. Now it's time to use it." Mia took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. She had come so far in such a short time. She had found strength she never knew she had. But now, with everything on the line, she was terrified. "I don't know if I'm ready," she whispered. The Vampire King's gaze softened, and for the first time, Mia saw a hint of vulnerability in his eyes. "None of us are ever ready, Mia," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "But we do what we must. And we fight for what's worth protecting." Mia nodded slowly, the weight of his words settling over her. She wasn't alone in this anymore. She had come this far, and she couldn't back down now. "All right," she said, her voice steadying. "Let's fight." The Vampire King gave her a small, approving nod before he moved to the door. "We don't have time to waste. Let's go." Mia followed him, her heart pounding in her chest as they made their way through the quiet halls of the building. The moment they stepped outside, the cool night air hit her like a shock to the system. The city around them was quiet, but Mia could feel the shift in the atmosphere. Something was coming. They walked quickly, the Vampire King leading the way, his every step purposeful. Mia felt the weight of the power inside her, a constant presence now, urging her forward. She could feel it building, pulsing with every step, ready to be unleashed. The street ahead was deserted, and the only sound was the soft echo of their footsteps on the pavement. "We need to get to the safe house," the Vampire King said, his voice low. "It's the only place where you'll be safe from them." Mia nodded, her mind racing with a million thoughts. What if they didn't make it? What if they were too late? The tension in the air was thick, like a storm that was about to break. As they rounded a corner, Mia felt a chill run through her, a sensation that made her stop in her tracks. The Vampire King paused, sensing it too. "They're close," he murmured, his voice tight with urgency. Mia's heart raced as she turned to face him. "What do we do now?" "We fight," he said, his voice steady despite the rising tension. "You've got this, Mia. Now show them who you are." Mia took a deep breath, her power surging through her. She didn't know what was coming, but she was ready to face it. The time for running was over. She was done hiding. Whatever happened next, she would face it head on. And she would not let them take her power. She was ready to fight for her future, ready to fight for her freedom. The tension was unbearable as Mia and the Vampire King continued their swift pace through the night, moving toward what could be their last chance for survival. Mia's heart raced, every step feeling like it was taking her further into the unknown. The city streets around them seemed unervingly empty, the quiet broken only by the sound of their footsteps echoing off the pavement. She could feel the power inside her, swirling like a storm just beneath the surface. It was a strange sensation, knowing that she held such potential, such strength, but at the same time, it terrified her. Her thoughts kept drifting back to the Vampire King's words earlier. "Now show them who you are." She wasn't sure she was ready for this. She didn't know what would happen when they faced the forces after them. But there was no turning back now. The moment the danger had been revealed, the weight of it pressed down on her like a 1,000-pound burden. "They're close," the Vampire King muttered, his voice barely audible. Mia felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand up as the air grew colder. The tension was thick, and she could feel the darkness gathering around them, like a predator waiting to strike. "How do we fight them?" Mia asked, her voice shaking slightly. The Vampire King glanced at her, his expression intense, but resolute. "We use your power, Mia. You've been training for this. You've learned to control the energy inside you. Now it's time to unleash it. You can do this. Don't let fear hold you back." Mia nodded, though her stomach was tied in knots. She had never truly fought before. Sure, she had been pushed, cornered, and hurt, but this was different. This wasn't a fight against a person who could hurt her physically. This was a battle against something far greater. The forces after her weren't just vampires. They were powerful, ancient beings who had their own agendas, and they wouldn't hesitate to take her power for their own. As they turned another corner, the Vampire King stopped abruptly, his eyes scanning the area. Mia instinctively followed his lead and looked around, trying to sense anything out of place. Then she saw it. A shadow in the distance, moving faster than anything human could. It was more than just a figure. It was a presence, dark and malevolent. "Get ready," the Vampire King said quietly, his voice unwavering. "They're here." Mia's heart stopped. The dark figure loomed closer, and she could see more now. There were others. A group of them, moving in tandem, as though they were all part of one massive entity. Their eyes glowed a sickly red, and the energy they radiated made the air hum with malevolence. The Vampire King stepped forward, his stance protective as he positioned himself in front of Mia. "Stay behind me," he ordered, but Mia could feel the power in her building, the same energy she had been learning to control. She wasn't going to stay hidden. She wasn't going to be weak anymore. She stepped forward, her eyes locking onto the approaching figures. The Vampire King turned to look at her, his eyes darkening with a mix of caution and understanding. "Mia, no," but it was too late. The moment the first of the shadowy figures reached them, Mia raised her hands. She focused on the energy within her, letting it pulse through her, gathering in her palms. She felt it, raw and untamed, like a wildfire ready to consume everything in its path. Without thinking, she released it. A wave of pure power shot out from her hands, slamming into the oncoming figures. The force of it was so strong, so intense, that the first few vampires were knocked back, their bodies crashing into the concrete. The ground beneath them trembled, as if the earth itself was reacting to her power. Mia couldn't believe it. The power she had felt inside her, it was real. She had done this. The Vampire King stood silent for a moment, watching her, as if processing what had just happened. Then he nodded. "You're ready," he said, his voice filled with both pride and a hint of surprise. But there was no time for celebration. The vampires were regrouping, their bodies already beginning to heal from the blast. "They're not finished," the Vampire King said, his tone turning serious. "You'll need to do it again." Mia swallowed hard, but this time, she wasn't afraid. She could feel the power within her, and it was growing stronger with every breath she took. She raised her hands again, focusing on the energy deep inside her, willing it to come forth. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for her future, for her freedom, and for everything that had been taken from her. As she released the power again, it was even stronger than before. The blast of energy swept through the group of vampires, sending them flying in all directions. They screeched in pain, but they didn't stop coming. The force she had unleashed had given her a taste of what was possible, but she could feel that it wasn't enough. Not yet. The vampires were regrouping once more, their eyes glowing brighter, their figures more solid than before. The Vampire King moved to stand beside her, his voice low and steady. "Keep going, Mia," he said. "Don't hold back. You have the strength to end this." And for the first time, Mia truly believed him. She wasn't running anymore. She wasn't hiding. She was ready to fight, ready to take control of the power that had been awakened inside her. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, feeling the energy surge within her. This was it. There was no turning back now. With a forceful movement, Mia unleashed the full brunt of her power, a tidal wave of energy, so strong it shook the very foundations of the city. The vampires were thrown back, their bodies unable to withstand the sheer force of her power. As the final figure collapsed, Mia stood panting, her body exhausted but victorious. The battle was over, and for the first time, she felt truly free. The aftermath of the battle left the streets eerily quiet. The vampires that had attacked them were gone, their bodies scattered, still and lifeless. Mia stood in the center of it all, her breath coming in ragged gasps, her body trembling with the exertion of the fight. She had done it. She had used the power that had been awakened inside her to protect herself and the Vampire King. As the silence stretched, Mia glanced over at the Vampire King, who stood a few feet away, his expression unreadable. He had watched her fight, stood beside her, but he had not intervened. It was clear now more than ever, he had trusted her. And somehow, That trust had given her the strength to fight, to stand her ground against the danger that had come for her. She wiped the sweat from her brow, her heart still racing, as the adrenaline slowly ebbed away. "Are they all gone?" she asked, her voice hoarse. The Vampire King's gaze swept over the area, his sharp eyes scanning every inch of the scene. "For now," he said, his voice cold and steady. "But they will return. They always do." The weight of his words hung in the air like a dark cloud. Mia felt a chill settle in her chest. She had known the battle wasn't over, but hearing him say it so plainly made it all the more real. She had stepped into a world where danger lurked around every corner, a world where the power she had just begun to understand made her a target. "What happens now?" Mia asked, her voice barely a whisper. The Vampire King turned to her, his gaze softening for just a moment before he spoke. "Now we prepare. There are more like them out there. Vampires, factions, others who will want to take what you have." He paused, taking a step closer. "Your power is more than just a weapon. It's a key, and it's up to you to decide what you'll do with it." Mia swallowed hard. The weight of his words pressed heavily on her. She had spent so long running from her past, from the man she had married, from the life she had been forced to live. But now, she couldn't hide anymore. The power inside her, the same power that had saved her in that moment, was something she had to learn to control, and she had to learn quickly. "I don't know if I'm ready for all of this," she admitted, her voice shaky. "I don't know if I'm strong enough." The Vampire King's eyes softened, and for a moment, Mia saw something there, a flicker of understanding, perhaps even empathy. "You are stronger than you know," he said quietly. "But strength doesn't come from power alone. It comes from understanding it, embracing it." He reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You've already taken the first step. Now, we walk the rest of this path together." His words, his reassurance, seemed to calm the storm of thoughts swirling in her mind. She had been scared, terrified, for so long. But now, for the first time, she felt something different. Hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, she could make it through this. She could control the power inside her, and she could fight for her future. She wasn't alone in this anymore. The Vampire King was right. She had taken the first step, and now, she had to keep moving forward. Mia took a deep breath, steadying herself. "All right," she said, her voice firmer now, the doubt beginning to fade. "Let's prepare. Let's find out what I'm truly capable of." The Vampire King gave a small nod, his expression approving. "We'll start with the basics," he said. "There's a lot you need to learn, but I believe you're ready to begin." And just like that, the world around them shifted. The uncertainty that had weighed so heavily on her began to lift, replaced by a sense of determination. She didn't know what was coming next, but she knew that she had the power to face it. Mia and the Vampire King moved deeper into the city, their footsteps quick and purposeful. The future ahead of them was uncertain, filled with dangers they couldn't yet understand. But for the first time, Mia felt ready to meet it head-on. The power inside her was no longer something she feared. It was something she could wield. And with that realization came a sense of freedom, a freedom she hadn't known in years. As they walked through the darkened streets, Mia could feel the weight of her past lifting off her shoulders, piece by piece. She was no longer just running. She was fighting for herself, for the life she wanted to build. And as they disappeared into the shadows, she knew that whatever lay ahead, she would face it with everything she had. The days that followed were a blur of training, strategy, and growing anticipation. Mia could feel herself changing, evolving, with every passing moment. The power inside her was no longer just a force to be controlled. It was part of her, a part that was becoming harder to ignore. She had embraced the truth of who she was becoming, and with each lesson from the Vampire King, she grew stronger. But the danger was never far behind. The forces that sought her power had not given up, and with every victory in her training, Mia knew they were getting closer. The Vampire King was always by her side, watching, guiding, and teaching. His presence was both a source of comfort and an unspoken reminder of the threat looming over them. Yet, Mia was not the same woman who had run away from her past. She was no longer afraid. The fear had been replaced by something far more powerful: purpose. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about taking control of her life, her future, and the power she had unlocked within herself. One night, as the moon hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the city, The vampire king turned to Mia with a serious expression. "Tonight, we face them," he said, his voice steady. But there was an edge to it, something that spoke of the battle ahead. Mia nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. This was it. The time had come to face the forces that had been hunting her, to stand and fight for everything she had fought so hard to reclaim. They had trained, planned, and prepared for this moment. And now, there was no turning back. They made their way to the old, abandoned building on the outskirts of the city. It was a place Mia had learned to know as the safe house, but tonight, it would be the battlefield. As they entered, the air was thick with tension. The vampire king's gaze swept the room, his eyes narrowing. "They're here," he muttered. Mia could feel the presence of others, dark and oppressive, surrounding them. Her heart raced, but she held her ground. She had come this far, and she wasn't about to back down now. From the shadows, figures emerged. They were vampires, just as the vampire king had warned. Their eyes glowed with an unnatural hunger, and their movements were fluid and predatory. But Mia wasn't afraid. She could feel the power within her rising, pulsing, ready to be unleashed. The vampire king stepped forward, placing himself between Mia and the oncoming threat. "Stay behind me," he said, his voice commanding, but Mia didn't move. She was ready. "No," she replied, her voice steady. "I'm not hiding anymore." The vampire king looked at her for a moment, his gaze intense, but there was a flicker of approval in his eyes. "Then let's do this together." Mia raised her hands, feeling the energy surge through her once again. She could feel the heat building within her, a force that was now as familiar as her own heartbeat. She focused, willing the power to respond. And then, with a force she had never known she possessed, she released it. A wave of energy exploded from her hands, crashing into the group of vampires, sending them flying backward. The ground shook beneath her feet as the power rippled through the room, lighting up the darkness with its intensity. Mia's breath was ragged, but she didn't stop. She could feel the vampires regrouping, their eyes glowing brighter, their movements faster. But Mia was faster. She unleashed another wave of energy, more powerful than before, and the vampires faltered. The vampire king fought alongside her, his own power unmistakable as he dispatched their enemies with precise, deadly movements. Together, they were unstoppable. But Mia knew the fight wasn't over. As the last of the vampires fell, there was still a presence in the room, one that was darker, more powerful than the rest. From the shadows, a figure stepped forward, its eyes glowing an unnatural shade of red. The air seemed to thicken around them, and Mia could feel the presence of something ancient, something that had been waiting. The vampire king's posture stiffened. "This is the one," he said, his voice low, a hint of something dark in it. "The leader of the faction that has been hunting you." Mia faced the figure, her heart pounding, but her resolve was clear. This was it. This was the moment she had been preparing for. The figure stepped into the light, and Mia gasped. It was like looking at a darker, older version of the vampire king, but with eyes that held nothing but malice. "You're too late," the figure said, its voice cold and echoing with power. "She's mine." Mia's hands tightened into fists, the power inside her crackling like a storm. "No," she said firmly. "I'm not anyone's." The figure snarled, its eyes narrowing. "We'll see about that." The battle that followed was like nothing Mia had ever experienced. The power inside her surged to its limits as she faced the leader of the vampire faction, the energy within her fighting for control. It was a battle of wills, and Mia could feel herself slipping at times, the weight of everything she had been running from pressing down on her. But she wouldn't back down. Not now. The vampire king fought fiercely beside her, his strength and skill unmatched, but Mia knew this was her fight to win. With one final, overwhelming surge of energy, she struck. The figure screamed as the power consumed it, and in an instant, the presence that had been hunting her was gone. The room was silent, the battle finally over. Mia stood, breathing heavily, her body shaking with exhaustion, but she was standing. She had won. She had claimed her power. She had claimed her future. The vampire king stepped up beside her, his expression unreadable, but his eyes filled with something like pride. "You did it," he said quietly. Mia nodded, feeling the weight of the moment settle over her. The fight was over, but this was only the beginning. With the power she had unlocked, With the strength she had found inside herself, she was ready for whatever came next. She wasn't running anymore. She was standing tall, ready to face the future on her terms. The world had changed, and so had she. Vampire stories have captivated audiences for centuries, weaving tales of mystery, power, and the unknown. In this gripping narrative, a woman discovers a power within herself that she never knew existed, pulling her into a world of vampires, danger, and supernatural forces. As she embraces her new abilities, she must navigate the complexities of her past, while facing off against those who want to control her newfound strength. With a vampire king as her guide, she learns to harness her power, but she soon realizes that the battle for her future is far from over. As the story unfolds, the stakes grow higher, and the line between friend and foe blurs, leaving her to make life-changing decisions. The tension builds as Mia discovers the true nature of her power, and in the end, she finds herself standing tall, ready to face whatever comes next. These vampire stories are filled with action, suspense, and romance, as Mia embraces her fate and battles for her place in a world filled with danger and intrigue. If you enjoy vampire stories that delve into the depths of supernatural power and personal transformation, this tale will keep you on the edge of your seat from start to finish. With dark secrets, powerful forces, and a heroine who discovers her true potential, this is a story that will stay with you long after the final page.